Hello guys, welcome to this video, and in this video series we are coding an LLM from scratch. In this video we will be learning about basics of PyTorch and Tensors. So let's get started. What are tensors? These are the building blocks of all the kind of algorithms and the deep learning neural networks that we see today. Whenever you are training LLM to talk to you like a human, to converse, to translate, the basic units that we are processing are called as tensors. Even in like systems like when you are doing face recognition, you are building neural networks to train on a lot of, let's say, dog images to identify if a current image is a dog or not. There as well, you are processing 3D tensors. Tensors can be thought of as basic units of the computation of deep learning networks. Suppose let's think about what tensors are. First, I'll give you an intuition of what zero dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, and 3 dimension tensors are. Let's imagine that we are standing in front of this building. Let's say you're standing in front of this building and you want to know the temperature. What is the temperature? So this is like just one number, right? You can just think of it as like, okay, the temperature here is 23 degrees Celsius, right? You do not need anything else. So you can think of the dimension of the tensor as how many numbers do you need to define the property that you are wanting. So here the property that we were wanting is temperature, and how many numbers do we need to define it? Just one. We can just say it's 23 degrees Celsius here. Now let's imagine you live in this entire building, okay? And you can see in this image there is a very long hallway. In this long hallway, how can you find your room? If I give you information like the first room belongs to your friend, second room belongs to your sister, third room belongs to your brother, fourth room belongs to you, right? So you need an array of numbers. It will probably be the first room or the second room or the third room or the fourth room. So this can be thought of as a 1D tensor. Now let's say I tell you that you don't even know which floor do you live in, okay? You will ask me what is my floor number, and then you will ask what is your room number. It will be something like that. At floor 1, these are the rooms, 1, 2, 3. Then on floor 2, similarly, there will be rooms like 4, 5, 6, something like this, right? So how many numbers do you need to define this particular information? Now in this scenario, you will need the floor number as well as your room number. This can be thought of as a 2D tensor. Now let's think about what are 3D tensors. There is a complex. So what is a complex? It's like a lot of buildings are there together. So now you need to know what is your building number as well. To define your current address, you will require your building, then the floor, and then you will define your room number. And that's how we usually do when we write our addresses, right? It's basically your room number, floor, building, then you define something like maybe a city, then country. If you define all of this, all of this will be a five-dimensional tensor. You can think of tensors in this way. When we talk about the order, the rank, this is what I'm talking about. A simple number, it can be like a temperature, it can be, so it's a 0-dimensional tensor. You don't need any index to define. A vector is a 1D tensor. A matrix is a 2D tensor, and so on. In simple terms, if you want to remember like what is the dimension of your tensor, the number of square brackets you need to put to access your particular information, that is the dimension of your tensor. So you can think of it as like this. Let's say we take the example of the 2D tensor, right? First you will say that, yeah, I live on floor 1 and my room number is 2. So this is a 2D tensor. Now that we've learned about tensors, let's talk about PyTorch. So what is PyTorch? PyTorch is a deep learning framework which was developed by Meta, and it is one of the most popular and one of the most easy frameworks you can learn to implement neural networks, to implement an LLM from scratch. And there are three different aspects to PyTorch library. PyTorch implements a tensor library for efficient computing. So the tensors that we learned about, PyTorch has a really efficient library for processing all of these tensors. And in simple word, arrays, right? So it is very fast. The second is the automatic differentiation engine. So PyTorch includes utilities to differentiate computations automatically. This is a very tough job to do, and PyTorch will do this for you automatically. Whenever you're defining functions, it will automatically define the differentiation function and the values. And finally, it also has a very good deep learning library which is implemented. So you can easily make use of the tensor library, the automatic differentiation engine, and it feels like you are coding in Python. So this is a library and a framework which is widely used by both researchers and developers as well. Let's get started into the coding part of it. Okay, so this environment is called as Google Colab, and for our tutorial purposes, we'll be using Google Colab. And I will be uploading all of these code files on my Kaggle account. So you can easily download all of this explanation and the code from there. So let's get started. First, we will import Torch. So this is a command where you can easily import this Torch library. Now, let's see what is the version of the Torch which is being installed here. You can do this by writing this particular command, which is torch._version_. And we see that we have 2.6.0 installed. It can be different in your machine based on the timeline when you're watching this video, and it's also based on the environment that you are implementing this. Now, let's check if we have a GPU available. So how you can do this, right? We can write a command which is torch.cuda.is available. And we can see that, yes. Why is this available? Because if you go to the runtime and see the change runtime, I have already selected a T4 GPU for us. What this allows us is an hourly access to the Google GPUs, and that is pretty awesome. And this is basically for free. So you can go ahead and do your learnings here. So we have a GPU available for us. Let's start with the zero-dimensional tensor, which is tensor.torch.tensor23, right? So this will define a 1D tensor. That's how you get a 1D tensor. Now let's go ahead and define a 1D tensor. Torch.tensor, and then you give it like an array. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So this is how you can define a 1D tensor. After this, let's go ahead and try to define a 2D tensor. So this is basically a matrix that we can define, right? So what is a matrix? A matrix is a list of two 1D tensors. So let me go ahead and copy this. This is a list of 1 and then comma 1 more, right? So this is a 2D tensor that we have defined. Basically a list of two 1D tensors. Now let's go ahead and define a 3D tensor. Now what will be this, right? This will simply be a list of one or more 2D tensors. So you can just go ahead, copy this, right? I copied this, comma, one more comma, right? So this is how a 3D tensor. How many brackets will you need to access one element of this 1D tensor? You'll need one bracket, right? So you can basically write, let's see. So we can write print tensor 1D, comma, 0, right? So it says, yeah, the tensor, comma, 1. And if you say tensor 1, it's tensor 2, right? So these are the values you're accessing. And remember that we are just using one square bracket here, right? So now how to access elements of a 2D tensor? For example, you can simply go ahead and write tensor 2D 0, comma 0, right? This is giving me the first element here. So that's why this is a 2D tensor. It's basically your floor number and your room number, and then you get the value which is present there. Here you just needed to mention your room number because you're already standing in a hallway, right? So this is how you can think about it. And in this video, you have learned the basics of tensors and PyTorch. See you in the next video.